Chin lipo, this is probably my favorite procedure, and today we're gonna talk about a lot of different things, such as the weird noises that nobody talks about, the numbing experience, what it's really like to get it done awake, fibrosis, asymmetric smile, nerve injury, the recovery, the 3 incisions, if you really need skin tightening or not, and then who's a good candidate, platysmal bands, basically everything behind the scenes, everything that patients have ever complained to me about, everything that patients are happy about, everything that patients say, man, I didn't know that before I got it done. So starting off the treatment itself, I had chin lipo done about 3 years ago now. My results are still holding really strong. I've got a super defined jawline. And what I always tell the patients, I wasn't born like this. I had quite a potato right under here, and it made it so that I never really had a strong shadow from where my face ended going into the neck. So I had my chin lipo procedure done awake. What that means is it's very similar to going to the dentist where they put lidocaine in the entire area, and then you feel pressure, you feel vibration, but it doesn't feel painful, it just feels weird. And typically what I do for my patients, I also give them a cocktail of medications to make them relax. So I typically use lorazepam or Ativan. If you've ever taken Xanax, it's basically a cousin in the same family of medications. And what that does, it makes the patients just relax. I always say it's kind of like a medicine to make them stop being so tense during the numbing and just let them kind of close their eyes and sometimes even fall asleep. I've had patients, especially the ones over 50, where they'll be snoring as I'm doing their procedure. So it's awake, you're breathing on your own, it's a lot lower risk. There's no BMI limit to it because you're not gonna be under general anesthesia, but it's very comfortable. Basically, I take a tiny little baby needle, I make a little bleb right here so you don't feel it when I do the slightly larger needle, and I'm gonna run that all underneath the skin starting from this point here. I'm gonna go all the way along the jawline, all the way down that neck. I'm gonna go even up here a bit, especially if they're over 25, 30. I like to run the skin tightening device here, so that helps quite a bit. And then I'll feather it all the way to behind the ear here, so I get really good coverage. They look way worse after they get numb. Like, they look like a bullfrog basically, and it's gonna look a lot larger than what you're used to your neckline looking like, but it works instantly. So that numbing medication right away, you're gonna feel like your neck is so big. And then the next step, I make my 3 little entry points. So I'll make one right here under the chin. A lot of patients have scars there already because they fell when they were younger, so I'll tend to use the same one. Then I make one behind each ear that you won't be able to see. And then I use my cheese grater tool basically to make the tracks where my lipo cannula is gonna go. And that cheese grater tool, it's called a disruptor cannula. It really does look like a cheese grater, and it makes a weird sound. When you're doing it, I'll tell the patients it's gonna sound like because you're breaking up a lot of that connective tissue that exists around the fat. There's a common misconception where people think fat is like a milkshake, and that if I just put my cannula under the skin, it's gonna be like a vacuum sucking up a milkshake, and it's so easy and everything just comes out. And that's really not how fat is. Fat has a lot of connective tissue around it, which is what you're breaking up with that disruptor cannula. And by doing this, pre-tunneling, you're gonna make it so that when I finally put the cannula in and my vacuum is on, I can go into those deeper layers versus sometimes your cannula gets forced too superficially, and that can cause problems with the end result, and just allows me to define where that cannula is gonna go. So the next step after I've made those tunnels, I take my cannula and I turn on the vacuum, and I do power assisted liposuction. What that means is that the cannula is vibrating the entire time. So it's going in and out like this, even when I'm just holding it. And that just helps the fat not to get trapped at the tip. So that vibrating action, once I put it inside that entry point, it actually gets conducted up the jawline bone. So you're gonna hear it pretty loud in your ear, and it's gonna sound like a constant in your ear. So again, that's where the Ativan really helps. Then I'll be able to suck all the fat out from the 3 entry points. And there's a lot of debate on the internet on whether you need 1 entry point or 3 entry points. And I'm a really big believer in the 3 entry points, even if you have only a tiny bit of fat centrally in the middle right here. 3 entry points is going to give you a better result. And the reason is that the standards and the expectations from patients have really shifted from, I just want to get rid of a little bit of fat here, into I want to have the most defined snatched jawline, so when I look like this, it looks like I can cut glass. And the only way to achieve that consistently is you need the entry point behind the ears coming this way. So you're creating an additional vector basically for your cannula to come in and suck out fat. Think of it as a lever. You know, if you're only sucking fat out from here, you're gonna have a lot less control all the way back here than you do around this section. So you're gonna end up over sectioning here and under suctioning all the way back here. When you do 3 entry points, then you're able to come from all the different angles, and then your result's a lot better. The other thing comes down to skin tightening. When you're doing your skin tightening, if you only do it from one angle right here, that result is never gonna be as good as if you're also overlapping and making your passes coming down this way. So for 2026, you have to do 3 incisions if you wanna have an Instagram level selfie picture. That's the only way. If your surgeon's saying that 1 entry point's good, go look at their before and afters. They're not as good as mine. So I've explained the entry point process. I actually use 2 different cannulas to do suction, and I think this is another important point on the different layers of fat. So I use a bigger cannula, a little bit thicker for suctioning the deeper fat. And then I have a much thinner cannula that allows me to do liposuction a little bit more superficially, so I can thin out the skin a little bit more. You don't want to overdo it, because that's where you get the ridges, the fibrosis, the weird cannula tracks. Like, you don't want that. But doing 2 rounds of suctioning from each incision is the reason that my results look like they do. And the next step, we're gonna do that disruptor cannula again, make sure that everything is as smooth and even as possible. Because even if I believe that I'm doing the most perfect liposuction possible, there's always the chance that there's a little irregularity left that cheese grater cannula will take care of for you. And then comes the last step, which is the skin tightening, another area of a lot of debate on the internet. I don't understand why. It's like all the old-timey surgeons say that if you're 20 years old, you don't need skin tightening. If you're 30 years old, sure, you can try it. And if you're over 40, you have to get a face and neck lift. And I just have found that that is not true, because again, our expectations nowadays are so much higher than they used to be. Even a 20-year-old, a 25-year-old wants the most defined possible jawline, and you can only get that if you do a good skin tightening treatment. And for the naysayers that say skin tightening doesn't work, you don't need it, I got it and it didn't work, no. They did the wrong energy settings on you. You have to get to a certain level of energy depending on your case. You know, if you're 20 years old and you don't really need a lot of skin tightening, maybe I'll only do 3 or 4 kilojoules on you. But maybe you're 70 and you are a face and neck lift candidate. You don't want to get a face and neck lift, so you come to me for minimally invasive skin tightening. And then I'm doing between 8 and 12 kilojoules, which is 3 or 4 times the energy that I would do on a 20-year-old. So in order to get that really great skin tightening result, you have to be patient. So ask your surgeon, hey, typically how much energy do you deliver? Like, what do you expect from me? Skin tightening, if you go on my gallery, it works really freaking well, and it's because of the technique that I do. It is not something that, special to the machine that, this machine doesn't work. No, any machine can work in the right hands. So that's the process. We numb you, we do the lipo, we do skin tightening, then we wrap you up. When it comes to the wrapping up, sometimes people don't realize that their whole lower mouth is gonna be weak. So when you go to eat, you're probably gonna have to pull that thing down. I know that when I had chin lipo, it was really, really tough to eat for the first few days because I couldn't really bring my mouth down like this. So it's okay if you wanna slide it down a bit when you're eating, that probably would be the best way. And then speaking of that weakness, when I had mine done, I had a pretty significant mandibular nerve injury where it was just inflamed for probably 2 or 3 weeks. So when I would smile, it was like sideways like this, and this is what the picture looked like. But it's not super common, probably between 2 and 5% of cases, I would say, but it is something to be aware of. If you're getting your chin lipo a week or 2 before a big event, then maybe that's not a great idea, because if you did have a nerve injury, I would probably wait at least 6 weeks. They're never permanent. It's not like a facelift or a neck lift where the nerve could actually get cut or transected. With the chin lipo and skin tightening, it's always going to be temporary. I've seen it in my patients a few times, and really 2 weeks later, it looks much less. 4 to 6 weeks later, it's always completely resolved. So if that does happen to you, don't freak out. It wasn't something that your surgeon did wrong. It wasn't something they did on purpose. It wasn't something that you could have avoided. When it happened to me, I just saw it as a natural, thing that could have happened, and it went away because my smile is perfect now. Another thing you might notice after your chin lipo is fibrosis. So anytime a patient has a procedure, honestly, you start looking at the area all the time. It's the only thing that you can focus on. So when you're looking in the mirror, when you're taking those front-facing selfies, you're just staring at it all the time. So you may notice more lumps and bumps than you had before. When I had my chin lipo, I had a round ball right here for about 8 months, and it wasn't super visible. It was just something that I could feel. It was underneath my skin. It felt hard, and that's what fibrosis is. It's just that inflammation, scar tissue formation that happens after basically liposuction and skin tightening procedures. It almost always goes away on its own. So if you give it some time, and I'm not talking about 3 months, I'm talking all the way up to a year. Like mine didn't resolve until 8 months. So I'm speaking from personal experience here. You can try the massages, you can try ultrasound, all this stuff that people do, but a lot of the times it's just time. If you have a very significant fibrosis reaction and it's really, really bothering you, I did have one patient, she had kind of a band here. There's injections that you can put in there of steroids, and that can help it go away a lot faster. But I'm personally a bigger fan of just giving it a little bit of time, because a lot of it will go away on its own, and the steroids can have their own problems too. So when you start staring at this area, and let's say you don't have fibrosis, but maybe you're now dealing with platysmal bands. So what platysmal bands are, the muscle, the platysma, it wraps around all here, right? And when you have a fat face or a fat chin, you can't see these bands because there's fat covering it. So after your chin lipo, you might notice that when you smile or when you really bring down the lower face, that you can see these bands coming out. See right there? A lot more than maybe you might never even known you'd had those bands before. And when you pull your face up like this and you start taking those pictures with yourself with your front camera, and you're noticing these little literal lines underneath your skin. Those are platysmal bands. And it's very common to have platysmal banding after chin lipo because as you get older, that platysma gets weaker and it's not as attached to the angle of your jawline here as much as it used to be. So that's when, if that really bothers you, you could go and get a neck lift and get that fixed. For me, mine is super minimal. I don't care. I think my jawline looks great and I'm not ready for a neck lift, obviously. So if you do notice a little bit of banding, like leave it alone. If you have significant banding and it's really bothering you, then just know that you probably were a candidate for that neck lift, and that's something that you can still go and do. Like nothing is stopping you from getting a neck lift. It's just if you weren't ready for a neck lift right away, that's something that could happen. So who's a good candidate? For chin lipo, if you're under 40, you're probably a great candidate for chin lipo with skin tightening 3 incisions. If you're over 40, that's where I judge on a case-by-case basis. A lot of the patients that come to me, honestly, they're self-selected. They want a less invasive procedure. They don't want the downtime or the scars really that come with getting a neck lift. So they'll decide to do a Renuvion skin tightening treatment with chin lipo, maybe some lower face filler, and they're really, really happy with their results. Like I've had patients in their 70s get this procedure, and to me, I'm like, hey, you would really benefit from a neck lift, but they're not willing to do that. So why am I gonna make them do something that they don't wanna do? So under 40, absolutely. 40 and over, it depends on your expectations. You can send us some pictures and I can say, hey, this is realistic for you. And in my before and after like compilation, my books, my gallery, I have easily 100 chin before and after photos, and that's just the ones that are like, yeah, you can use my pictures. I've done hundreds of chin lipo cases, and there's definitely somebody in there that looks like you. Even men, there's less men before and afters, but there's a lot of men that are getting this procedure done as well. Okay, so we've talked about chin lipo here for quite a long time. Hopefully I answered a lot of questions for you guys. And if there's anything else that you want to know, just drop it in the comments and we'll make a follow-up video. Thanks.